Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Reinvent Legal Business Series number 2. In this series, as folks will know if they've been attending some of our other sessions, we're exploring things from a global perspective. So we're looking at new themes that have emerged, those that have changed or expanded in our legal ecosystem. We offer these sessions as live webinars, like you see us here today, but we also make them available as part of our Legalpreneurs Sandbox podcast series. So you can watch or you can listen, whatever is most convenient to you. Today, we're discussing what do law firm clients really need and want, and we're going to be exploring things like whether client experience and client satisfaction are the same or different. And we're going to be talking about the importance and the need of a client-first strategy, whether or not legal products and services can be customized, and how to establish, develop and maintain client relationships in a virtual world, one that's going to be with us for a long time, if not permanently. And of course, we're going to be discussing lots more. I'll be asking these questions of these fabulous people that you can see in front of you. And we're going to be getting you to, or encouraging you to pose your questions too. The panel that you have in front of you today hails from Australia and the USA. So morning for Australia, evening for the USA. So our panelists are going to introduce themselves and they're going to talk a little bit about the work that they do. And they're going to do that right now. But just to get us started, let me firstly say a huge welcome to Silvia and Marcie, Carl and Ben. Hi, folks. Good to see you.
Hello.
They're waving. You can see them. They're all live. So Silvia, I'm going to get you to kick us off, and I'm going to ask you all this question as I indicated, but I wanted you just to tell us a little bit about, your title, where you're located, the work that you do, what your organisation does as well. And you're coming to us from just outside the Boston area. So I know it's evening there. So welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Terry. Welcome, everybody. I'm Silvia Coulter, and I am a co-founding principal of LawVision Group, and I head up our business development and growth practice. And so that encompasses everything from client retention, client growth, and new business development. And I think one of the things I'm most excited about that I'm working on now is a book I'm co-authoring with one of my partners, Steve Bell, called, very relevant to tonight and today's discussion, called SAM Legal, which is strategic account management. So SAM Legal, from key client planning to strategic account management. And, we'll probably be talking about a lot of strategic account management during this podcast. So thank you very much, Terry.
So Silvia, when that's published, you're going to have to tell us, because, we'll want to do something, raffle it or something, it sounds like a great idea.
Well, it'll be on Amazon within the next 60 days. So
Excellent. Well done, and congrats on that.
Thanks.
Marcie, I know that you have a hurricane bearing down on you, but things are looking pretty good at the moment. So welcome, and likewise, tell us about you.
Thank you. So I'm Marcie Borgal Shunk. I'm president and founder of the Tilt Institute and a former colleague of Silvia's, where I was on the strategy team at LawVision. Tilt Institute helps law firm leaders create data-driven strategies and use competitive advantage from data. So what that means is typically a lot of leadership training and facilitation, culture work, strategic planning, and some go-to-market planning. And what I'm most excited about right now, I think, is the transition. I know we're all moving into a remote environment, and so we've transitioned a lot of our work with leaders online. And right now I'm working with another colleague, John Mitchell, on a leadership program that is going to be entirely designed to be delivered remotely and is going to tap into so many different instructional techniques and tools for the e-learning world. So we're excited to be working on that.
So Marcie, that might actually end up being a video conference that we want to attend, apart from this one as well. So that sounds Fantastic. And folks, we are playing a little bit by ear here because Marcie truly does have a hurricane coming down. So we'll manage that and we'll keep our fingers crossed for lots of different reasons that all goes well. Ben, we're going to flip from America and now come back to Australia. Tell us all about you.
Sure. Thanks, Terri. As Terri said, I'm Ben Farrow. I'm a co-founder and managing director of FirmChecker.com.au. And we're a ratings and reviews platform for professional services, specifically lawyers and accountants. And what we aim to do is provide more transparency in the market and also provide detailed ratings, reviews, and feedback to professional services firms and help them improve their client experience, obviously highly relevant to today's topic. Yeah, really excited by the rate of change in the sector. When we started a few years ago, people sort of looked at us like we were crazy with reviews for law and accounting, and now it's becoming just par for the course. So I think as change continues to accelerate, I think it's going to be a really interesting space.
Yeah. And Ben, I want to thank you again for doing a Legal Techie Tuesday virtual demo of your platform for us, and just say to folks that if you're looking to have a look at this fabulous platform, don't forget to pick that one up as well and have a look at it there. So staying in Australia, but in kind of COVID lockdown central in Victoria, Carl, welcome to you. Tell us about you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carl White. I'm the founder of CXINLAW, and I like to call myself the Chief Experience Maker, one of a team of people doing similar things within my business. So what CXINLAW really helps law firms to do is create a remarkable service culture, and also client experience. And we do this through inspirational development that we hope turns staff into service champions and experience makers, and also, and very importantly, clients into promoters of the law firms that we're helping to develop this stuff with. We know that lots of really good things happen when a law firm can achieve and embed client experience success. So that means that I am, and we are always excited and passionate to be working in the area we're working in, because we know that those results materialize in really powerful ways if the law firm makes the client experience its focus.
And Carl, a perfect segue into our first question, and thank you all very much for the intros. And it's kind of, I guess, a little bit around definitions to kick us off as well. We hear the terms client experience and client satisfaction, and sometimes, terms have a shelf life and they just change, but other times they can be quite significant because they're going to obviously signal a difference in approach or culture or needs or expectations. So I wanted to address this question to you, Carl, for obvious reasons. This is your space. But does client experience differ from client satisfaction?
It's an interesting question. And I actually don't think one of them is different from the other. I think one leads to the other, if I could put it that way. So, if by definition a client experience is any moment where an impression of you or your firm is perceived by its clients, if that's a definition of client experience most broadly, then the result of a client experience can either be, negative, average, or amazing, right? So client satisfaction just falls into that kind of neutral territory. That's how I would define it. So the client experience equals either amazing, negative, or satisfaction. And I would absolutely say that, if what you're focusing on is client satisfaction, your law firm is probably already going backwards. It's not good enough today to be just focused on client satisfaction. We all know what good service looks like, feels like, what it sounds like, and we want more of it. Your clients are customers just like you are. So we need to be focusing on, client delight and not just client satisfaction, I think, in today's service world.
Yeah. Silvia, I wanted to ask you whether what Carl's just described is different or maybe has a different emphasis or focus in the US, and whether the terms kind of resonate there as well.
So I think it absolutely is universal and global. And, I think there are some very good examples of organizations that really try to create great client experiences. And I've used the hotel industry, which, Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton, and I think law firms can get there, but I also think that it's really understanding, and Carl, you and I have talked about this a tiny bit. It's really understanding, maybe you had a great, the outcome of the deal or the outcome of the litigation was fantastic. So that piece of the experience was great, but, other parts of it were not so great because it's not just about the lawyer, right? It's just not about the doctor. It's about the whole experience getting to the hospital and all of that. So when we look at client experience, we have to look at the whole spectrum of who's touching the client, and is it great all along the way, or is it partly satisfactory and partly great and partly, so it's very, very difficult in a law firm to accomplish this, but possible.
Yeah, and it's certainly the case that if we focus on client satisfaction, that getting the basics right, getting the service basics right, almost the remedial aspects of service right.
Mm-hmm.
We spend a lot of time just on the basics with law firms.
Mm-hmm.
That can be the biggest differentiator for law firms. The basics deliver consistently well. So focusing on client satisfaction is a part of that broader picture. And you're absolutely right to say that, everyone's a games maker in the client experience in a law firm, from the receptionist, the legal assistant, through to lawyers and the entire team. So we all need to know the part we play and deliver that part for sure.
So I guess what I'm taking away from that, and Ben and Marcie, I want to grab your thoughts about this as well, is that when we're talking about client experience, it's not semantic. It's a much broader and deeper I guess, overview of how the client is moving, as you say, Silvia, from the beginning all the way through to the end and beyond and back again, I guess, is within that journey as well. Ben, any thoughts in relation to those terms? Because I know you deal with this very topic, right, in the work that you do.
Yeah, quite a few thoughts. I think Carl hit the nail on the head in that client experience is essentially an input and the client satisfaction is a result. Inputs might be where you communicated with well and kept proactively updated, which we find is one of the biggest drivers of client satisfaction. That's part of the experience. Did the practitioner understand your needs, etc. And I think one of the traps that people can fall into is thinking, well, that's not really relevant to law. Because law is a grudge purchase and it's just, we're delivering our expertise. But a really good example, literally last week, is my partner went to the dentist, and if ever there was a grudge purchase, it would be a dentist. But she had an amazing experience. She booked online, had transparent pricing. When she arrived, she scanned a QR code, and her dentist came out and greeted her, and everything was uploaded to this app that she'd had to download so that she had access to all of her records, all of the diagnostics, etc. And then afterwards, after she'd had this sort of mouthwash that you're not allowed to eat for 2 hours, she actually got a reminder text saying, 2 hours is up and now you can go ahead. I think that's just a really good example of that was the experience, but what was the result? And what her result was that she was very satisfied and was telling me about it when she got home, and others. And I think
you're telling us now, Ben, as
exactly,
well, right?
It speaks to the impact of it. I'll do them a solid. They're called 99 Dental because it costs $99 for your first consultation. So I think it's just a really good example of how, with something that can be traditionally quite boring, if you can focus on that experience from go to woe, that can be really powerful as an output.
Yeah, absolutely. My dentist has a little door in a wall to the tooth fairy, which I thought was kind of pretty cute as well, right? Marcie, you are kind of, you're kind of the guru of data on all of this stuff. So What are your thoughts, or what do you see in your role as things that perhaps add or underscore some of the things that the other folks have mentioned?
So I think with respect to the client experience, part of it is understanding what ultimately creates a good client experience. So I think in Ben's example, in your story, you talked about it was part creativity, it was part communication, it was part understanding what that journey looks like for the client and anticipating those needs. So knowing that 2 hours later, that reminder would be helpful because you anticipate that that person is too busy to necessarily be thinking about that one thing. And I think with law firm clients, it's very similar, right? So it's not just about the results, the legal result, the outcome. It has much more to do with the responsiveness, the communication. Do you understand them? Do you understand their business? So that's where I think the data piece can really come in, is informing the lawyers and anyone who's working with the client as to the client's industry. What is their industry going through, especially right now, because not every industry is going through the same thing, and not every client within each industry is going through the same thing. So using the data to be able to understand that, to be able to understand what trends to be expecting moving forward, and then bringing it down even to a granular level, looking at it from the client perspective. So what does the client say they prefer in terms of communication? One of the things I found fascinating talking to clients was there are generational differences. There were certain clients that said, pick up the phone and call me. And there were others that said, please don't call me. If it's, when you call me, I have a panic attack because I think somebody's dying, where they would rather just text me or email me. So there are some very distinct differences across clients that it's important to understand, and data and information about the clients can help with that.
And I definitely want to jump into that. I'm going to call it the customization point a little later. But I think that one of the things too, Marcie, there really is to underscore is the fact that the data exists and has for a long time, but actually using it. And I know the other three of you use it all the time in the work that you do. But picking up on something that all of you have mentioned, and perhaps highlighting stuff that we've seen in the media quite a bit at the moment, and that is this kind of expose, I guess, in a way, that legal services and products have often and are still often seen as being built around what works best for the lawyer or the law firm or the legal department, as the case may be, and not the client. So it kind of digs in a little deeper to what we've just been discussing. So, Carl, I want to ask you first, do you think that's fair? I mean, that's kind of, I guess, the first question. And maybe in responding to that, if you could, just tell us a little bit about your mystery shopper work, because that probably speaks pretty strongly to that as well.
Sure does. Is that a fair statement? Well, I'm not sure if the word built is actually the word I would use to describe what's happened with service delivery within law firms. I actually think it's less about what they built. It's more about just how they happen to be delivering now by default, or even by accident, or in some cases even by neglect. Missing points in the client's journey where they could do much better. And our work is about helping them to design the experience. And one of those points of design is, we might describe it as the point of sale. In any other, kind of business area, we call it the point of sale. And this is where the mystery shopping comes in. And it's been fascinating to have this tool up our sleeve with law firms, because, most law firms we've discovered fail the first impression test. Significant majority of them fail the first impression test. And the sound you hear most often when you make contact with a law firm is the sound of inconvenience. It's not the sound of, hang on a moment, I'm dashing across the office to find exactly the person you need, who will be with you in just, under a second. It's the sound of interruption. It's a sound of what, you know, when the phone's being picked up, as opposed to, oh, hello, is that Carl? You know, that's what you get. And so, you know, the top firms convert 80% of their inquiries at this point of sale. And the bottom firms convert only about 30% of inquiries at this point of sale. So you can see the disparity between the two there, and, you know, the opportunity to focus even just on that part of the client experience, what a law firm can actually achieve. So, you know, it's about how do we look and sound as good as we actually are at each touch point with the client. And a very important touch point or set of touch points is that, you know, those first contact points. And we need to understand, you know, okay, so we have the service aspiration, but actually, are we bringing that to life? Do we understand what that looks like and sounds like? Do we have the skills and processes to bring that to life?
So taking that, Silvia, and just kind of, I guess, comparing it with the group that's often seen as the biggest competitors or a nemesis. I'm not too sure which one or how people differently would classify that, but I'm talking here about the legal consultancies like the Big Four. How are they approaching this client first strategy question? And I guess the other point of that is, if it's different, what could we learn from that in the legal industry?
Mm-hmm. Well, so let's start with the Big Four. And I think, you know, it's slightly different for the alternative legal service providers, but not too different. The Big Four had long ago, well, not so long ago, but at least 30 years ago at this point, realized that, like most commercial businesses, they have, let's say, 80 to 85% of the revenue coming from 15 to 20% of the customers or clients. And that holds very true today. If you analyze any law firm's client base, that is pretty much the case. Compare that to, so that should be our go-to-market strategy, right? We should really focus on strategic account management. And my other panelists here might agree with this here. And that is, if we really work at doing the best we can and servicing those clients, the rest will all benefit from that as well, right? And so I think that we've got to start looking at adopting strategies that are working very well and are proven by the competitors coming into the market, like the Big Four, two of which now are the largest law firms in the world, right? E&Y and PwC. The others not far behind. And so, you know, we've got partner plans, we've got office plans, we've got practice plans, we've got department plans, we've got firm plans. We don't have too many strategic account plans. And yet that's what's, you know, that's what's really needed. So I think looking at what succeeds from these big competitors, and also other service providers, right? They're not just competitors or coming up around the corner to be competitors. The ALSPs, some of that's a little different too, because they have really looked at that customer journey and refined it and are looking at how to build a better machine, right? Build a better mousetrap. And so that's another big threat is, you know, how can we, you know, it speaks a little bit to something we talked about and probably you'll get to, Terri, is customizing some of those services.
Yeah.
And as one general counsel said recently to a group of managing partners, when one of the managing partners said, but you don't understand, we don't know what all of the differing factors will enter into play here on a deal, or, you know, what we might discover in litigation. And one of them was with a global architectural firm, and he said, my dear gentleman, let me just explain something to you. We don't know what we're going to run into when we build a 70 floor tower in a city with lots of winds, but we still have to put the pricing together and meet the requirements. And so, that's how the client's thinking.
So Silvia, two things come out of that, if I can just follow up a bit before I come to you, Marcie and Ben. With all of those plans, we have more plans than we can poke a stick at. But it seems to me that one of the big issues is that those plans are often siloed. So we don't have that. We don't even have the practice areas speaking with each other, much less thinking about the sort of strategic approach to accounts that you were talking about. That's kind of the first bit. And the second bit is, if we're selling experience and not knowledge, and, I say this a lot, but want to underscore it here because I think that's indeed what law firms are doing now. We can all get knowledge. What we're selling is experience. Then to go to the point that you just ended on, we should be able to anticipate some of those things like all of the other professions, no matter what they're doing, because we're selling experience and not knowledge. So just a couple of quick follow-up thoughts on those two things, if I may. Silvia?
So I was listening to a podcast or a virtual program earlier today, and the only general counsel on the program, one of the questions I put in the chat box was, I'm listening to this and I keep hearing about value add and great client service. Could you define those for us? So, what I think happens is people use those words a lot, but what's the definition of what does that mean to the client? And it's probably pretty individual per client, right? In many cases. And I think the other thing, and this goes to a lot of what Marcie works on with the leadership, is that, law firm leaders and those in operations and all of us in marketing and business development and knowledge management and IT, we all follow what's going on and are keenly aware of what's going on in the marketplace and very interested in all these changes. And yet the day-to-day partners are working as hard as they can to deliver great work and to bill as many hours and to collect and all the other demands that they may have on them. But they don't really, I think, have the information that the leadership and management has. And so there's a gap there, clients saying what they want and leaders and those in operational roles understanding that and then wringing their hands because the lawyers don't get it. But the lawyers, how are we educating the lawyers about these things so that they do understand it? In addition to all the other, there's a lot of burden on the lawyers and we're asking them to do an awful lot. So I think there's some gaps there too. I sort of strayed away from the actual.
No, that was great. That was great.
Okay.
And Marcie, I want to just gather some quick thoughts from you and Ben before we jump into the customization question, because it is a big one and an important one. But I guess in terms of having a strategy and keeping on track, the data question is going to come up and should come up. So how does the work that you do, or picking up some of the thoughts from Carl and Silvia, how does that kind of translate into data points that we should look at and focus on?
Well, I think, in many ways it translates most readily into metrics, and client satisfaction, I think, is a metric. It is a measure of a point in time as to how people feel. But there are other metrics that firms can use, even leading metrics, where they're using touch points as a way to encourage people to engage with more frequency, for example, that will ultimately help drive the client experience. There are objectives in trying to sell more services to each client, which also correlates with Heidi Gardner's work directly to higher revenue and higher client satisfaction. And so there are a number of metrics, I think, from a data perspective that are useful, that correlate with a better client experience, that can be useful tools.
Absolutely. And folks, if you're not aware of Heidi Gardner's work, that's very much focused on collaboration and lots of opportunities just to do a quick Google search and to pick that up. So thank you, Marcie, that's great. And Ben, I'm just wondering how all of this client first strategy stuff translates for folks such as yourself that are working with obviously new technologies and engagement platforms and products here. Where and how do you see this sort of thing resonating through FirmChecker?
Yeah, well, we do have metrics obviously as part of the platform, and while the answer is kind of that it does depend on the individual client, obviously there are common themes that you can pull out and that apply across really large data sets, and that's what you have as your numerical metrics, albeit measuring qualitative things. So, you know, like reliability, for example. But equally, you can just have things as simple as free-form comments in what you're measuring, and then you can pick up all kinds of other things. So I think the important thing really from a firm's perspective is having a system in place. It doesn't necessarily matter which specific one it is, but using that as a means of quality control and feedback so that you can then actually know how you're going on a client by client basis and pick out the high level things that you want to then focus on. So I think, yeah, as it relates to data, it is important, even though it is qualitative data, because it's a lead indicator of how your business is going to perform over time financially. Because in the research that we've done, we've got a panel of buyers of professional services, specifically from boutique law and accounting firms. Most business is going to come from repeat business, followed by word of mouth recommendation. And then it becomes sort of the sales process, which is, you know, looking at less than 20% of the actual work that's coming in. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think, yeah, as it relates to data, I think it does have a place, and it's really important to use it as a monitoring tool.
It does. And I just wanted to underscore a couple of things that you said there, Ben. It was, you know effectively what the clients want and focus on it. And I think sometimes we know, and it seems, you know, redundant, but we don't actually focus on it. We don't actually do anything with it. And I think increasingly clients are and should be less forgiving about that we're seeking the feedback and not doing something about it is no longer okay. And I'm sure that you see that a lot. Let me jump into the customization question, because we've touched on it a few times. And I guess, you know, I guess the way that I look at it is, if we look at just about anything that we're all using at the moment, there is some level of customization available, but again, kind of reflecting thoughts that, or the discourse at the moment, the criticism is often that with legal services and products, it's a one size fits all, and we just kind of scale up or we scale down, but we're not really customizing as such. So I wanted to draw some of the threads together, but also kind of explore a bit more deeply how we might transform that approach, how we might actually customize legal services and products. But I should start with the first part of that, I guess, and a question for you, Silvia. Do you think law firms can actually customize legal services and products? And if they can, or I guess they can't, what are the challenges and opportunities there?
I think they absolutely can. And we've seen some firms do that. A lot involved. We've got to look at the client journey again, only this time it's on a product or service level, right? And all the stages. So, you know, any number of people have gone through Six Sigma and gotten a green belt or a yellow belt, or even, you know, some firms have black belts on their teams to really look at this. You know, I think it's definitely possible. Initially firms were saying, you know, you could do that with labor and employment, or you could do that with the regulatory services, but you can't do that with my high corporate work. Or there is a that they go through, and we've seen some firms, especially, you know, who have did a lot in technology on the KM front, really begin to master that. I would say, as an aside to all of that, you know, you can create a remarkable firm and that is delivering extraordinarily efficient services, and parallel with one another in different offices. We were actually talking to a big bank across the provinces in Canada, and I was facilitating a call with a specific law firm on this very topic, and the bank was saying, look, we worked with you on this huge deal, and we worked with every lawyer, you know, lawyers across all the provinces in your offices, and the work was outstanding, but all the documents looked really different because you guys aren't customizing anything. And that, I think, you know, what are the optics that the client, you know, is using to determine this? So, you know, and one other thing, it's very difficult to pull this apart and say, we're going to offer these great services, we're going to project manage them. And so you've created, let's say, the Ritz-Carlton of law firms with your service platform, but you forgot about the branding. So the market still sees you as a, you know, forgive me if anybody is related to the Hiltons, but, you know, they see you as a Hilton as opposed to a Ritz. So these things are all, I think Carl alluded to this very early on in the conversation, you know, it's all related, right? It's all part of what the client is dealing with. So you can't do one without looking at the whole spectrum of what else the firm is how the firm is marketing these products and services, and what is their reputation in the market, and how do we align that with the great products we've now created or the approach we've created.
But I guess marrying that with the client first strategy and just underscoring a little of the great points, many great points you made there, Silvia, is that it's really agreeing and defining what customization is with the client up front, because we could obviously see that as being potentially super expensive and very complicated, but maybe it is just as simple as getting the right logos on the documents, as you were saying. So, you know, I mean, it's I think that's really important to kind of emphasize here. I wanted to jump into, we've spoken about this journey a little bit, Carl, and if I may direct the question now to you on customization and basically how important it is to take that client journey. We've spoken about it in terms of client experience, but I guess now looking at it with a slightly different lens around customization, and because there's so many touch points, who you need to actually include as you're kind of walking along the customization journey, if it were.
Sure. Gosh, there's so many points that are being raised now, but I'll try and come directly to this. You know, who should be involved? And first of all, you know, what is a client journey, or what is a client journey map, more to the point? You know, it's an opportunity to look at all of the touch points where a law firm interacts with its clients, both from an on-stage point of view, so what the client kind of sees and experiences, and from a backstage point of view in terms of how the operators deliver. And we keep talking about the client first strategy, and I'm wholeheartedly behind that, of course, but I would as much say this is an employee first strategy. You cannot have an amazing CX first approach without an amazing EX first approach as well. And I think that may go to the heart of who needs to be involved as well, in answer to your question. We've discovered in the work we do using the tool of journey mapping that involving teams in that process is absolutely critical, and typically it's the first thing we do. So multidisciplinary teams, representatives from all roles and functions coming together to explore what the customers or the client's journey actually is using this human-centered design tool is a really powerful approach to take on many levels. It buys everyone into a client experience kind of initiative. It changes mindsets. It helps everyone adopt different perspective, and of course an important perspective to adopt is the client one. you also appreciate through doing this work that, you know, teams and staff members from all roles and functions they know what the challenges are to delivering well or not, you know, and they also have plenty of the answers as well. There are some things you just don't have to ask clients about, you know, there are some things that are just obvious to do well or to get fixed. And all of this comes up if you involve the team right from the start. Then the other aspect of this is bringing the client into it. So, you know, journey mapping will start kind of for us internally, it's called assumptive journey mapping. But then taking the output from that to the client as part of a broader piece of client listening is fascinating, because then the conversation you can have is kind of a different one to your traditional client interview, because you're actually talking about, you know, the ins and outs of service delivery, ins and outs of the service experience, and you're actually taking them through the journey, the journey map, and, you know, they're sharing ideas and they're sharing their challenges as they've experienced it through the journey, and then bringing all of those things together is where, and this needs to be explored a bit more. Maybe we don't have enough time to do it now, but I think it's partly about arriving at a service blueprint for the firm. Most firms do not have, amongst all those plans that were mentioned earlier by Silvia, do not have a playbook for client experience. They do not have a blueprint for service delivery. And within that, then, what can be customized? So we're working quite precisely with some law firms now on, you know, when we first are engaged by a client, we have a number of default settings, if you like, for how the work is done. And we discuss those with the client. And we have a template for doing that. That's part of our design. So the conversation is designed, you know, the things that the clients see are designed. And then we have a number of settings that we can actually change. It's not about customizing the entire thing. It's about discussing how we're going to do the work, not just getting on with the work, if that makes sense. But all of that is a touch point in the journey overall. Yeah. Has that gone some way to answer your question?
It does. And Marcie and Ben, I want to be sure to bring you in here, but I do kind of also want to jump into the virtual client relationship building space as well. So Marcie, just a quick one to you on this topic, and then to you, Ben. I guess in all of this, the question as we're sitting here listening to it is probably kind of like, are there data points that we can pull out? You know, what would be the key things that we would be wanting to pull out, maybe even the key metrics that we'd want to be focusing on, to see whether we should customize, but also if it's working. So Marcie, that question to you, if I may.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one thing I want to clarify is, in some ways, everything law firms do is custom from a legal services perspective, right? It is the client experience side that is not custom and rarely consistent. And in some ways, I almost feel like we should be talking about standards and standardization of the client experience, as opposed to the idea of just customization per se. Now, from an individual client perspective, I think that there's layers, right? So when you think about clients, there's the economic and global environment in which we all live. Then you bring that down to demographic shifts and changes, down to the industry level, and then down to the company level, right? Even looking at the retail sector, for example, Amazon is not experiencing the same thing right now as, say, Neiman Marcus. And so you're going to have to bring it down to that level, and then again to the individual person. And that's where we had a question in the chat about the emotional qualities of individuals and the emotional connections. And I think that that's a place where getting lawyers to a place, I got this book today, Permission to Feel, which I'm very excited about, which is by Mark Brackett, and he is writing about emotional intelligence in essence. And that is something that I think will ultimately bring lawyers to a place where they are better able and equipped to customize that experience at the personal client level.
And empathy obviously being a key part of that, and to pick up what you were saying, Carl, that in turn being a key part of the legal design thinking movement as well.
Mm-hmm.
Ben, just if I may ask a real quick word from you on this before we jump into the next one. These sorts of discussions and comments, perhaps around customization that you have been seeing from your work with FirmChecker?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it just is whether the service being provided is fit for purpose. That can kind of sound like it's cheap, but it's not. It's just, you know, you plot what's the risk or what's the gravity of the issue being addressed and how much is it actually going to cost. Sometimes something that's relatively cookie cutter is entirely appropriate for what the client's needs are. So I think, you know, keeping fees and what the value of the matter in mind is really important. And we see that in metrics by correlating the fee structure that's been taken with perceptions of value for the client. And, you know, while you might find that with less customized work, it tends to be on fixed fees more often, well, actually, when you control for all of the practice areas that we measure, people who are on fixed fees are actually more satisfied than people who are on hourly rates. So I think that that's an interesting point around what the actual appetite for a client is with respect to getting a customized service or something that is a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to jump into this virtual client relationship question, if I may. I guess in the world pre COVID-19, a lot of emphasis and indeed a lot was spoken about in terms of building the lawyer-client relationships of particularly trust and confidence face-to-face. And I guess with that, a thought that one can only build those relationships face-to-face, but we're not face-to-face, we're virtual now. And people are embracing that and thinking about it in a different way. So Ben, I wanted to stay with you first for this question, if I may. You folks work from a virtual platform and in many respects were set up from the beginning, if you like, to address this question of building client relationships virtually. How do you react to that kind of comment that the best relationships will be built face-to-face and can't be built virtually?
Yeah.
Beyond that's nonsense.
I won't say that's nonsense, but I will say I disagree with it. I mean, for example, some of our developers who we obviously work with every day, I work with them entirely virtually, but for having met them a couple of times, and we have a great relationship. But as it relates to legal services and accounting services, I'd say it's no different. We see there's been no drop off in client satisfaction. And if anything, what has happened is people are more diligent about actually reaching out to their clients and checking in on them than they were before COVID-19 struck. Maybe that's just because there's been an economic impetus to do so. But I think what you wouldn't want to see is for people to go backwards to sort of neglecting communications with their clients, where during the pandemic, they've been actually really quite good in proactively getting in touch with people. And at the end of the day, whether you're doing that virtually or in person, I don't think it really matters because, you know, clients, they have their own things to deal with. People are always thinking about what's going on in their world, and they, you know, the legal service is a means to an end. So I think that as long as it's fitting in there appropriately, then that's sort of enough, and that can easily be done virtually.
But it's, Silvia, it's probably in some respects, and to pick up very directly on Ben's points, also somewhat reshaping the nature of client relationships, isn't it? Because there will be an expectation that you'll be able to contact your lawyers in a different way. There will be, and great point, Ben, that expectation that we've now been interacting a lot more. You know, you've seen inside my home, you've seen my family, whatever the case may be. I expect that to be carried forward in the relationship that we're going to have going forward. So is it fair to say that this virtual environment has not just changed the way that we might be communicating, but is also reshaping in a way the nature of the lawyer-client relationship, or is that taking it too far?
I don't think it's taking it too far. I think what it's done is underscored or highlighted that relationships have always been built on, the way I look at it is two parallels, right? So many years ago, it might have been the 2 martini or 3 martini or more lunch, but the legal work still had to be done, and it better be done really, really well. But I was also, friends with my clients. And not that people aren't friends with their clients today, but it's emerged away from that. And I think it will continue to emerge. It was heading in this direction, and COVID-19 clearly pushed it, put some wind behind the sail, and people who were fighting that now see this works pretty well. And in fact, a lot of the lawyers we coach have had these aha, these gestalts like, oh, I get this now. I'm talking to clients about recipes and what's going on with their kids. And these are men and women. It's not just women, it's, many men. And I think, again, it's that EQ, you were talking about, Marcie, and really getting to understand there's an emotional piece to all of this, and that you can develop. I mean, look at, we're, we get married, but to people we've met online today, right? Now, maybe at some point you meet them in person, obviously, but relationships have been started virtually for a while now, and I think will continue. So I think it's helped facilitate what was happening anyway. And I think, actually, I had a call from a reporter last night about something like this topic, where, is there less opportunity for younger partners, especially women? Are they at a disadvantage because, and I said, I think everybody's at an advantage in a way because of this, because we can reach out. We don't have to, try and get somebody to go to lunch with us or meet with us. I mean, we just send them some dates and times and hook up a Zoom meeting, and we're all there. And it's very efficient. And I think that's what people are looking for today, is efficiency, and we can still see one another.
And I think also, Silvia, to go to your point, there's kind of now a real blurring of the lines, if there's any line at all. And I do want to put that out there, between work and life and work, right? Mm-hmm. It's a continuum that you just do more or less at different times of your day now. And I think the remote working has obviously, helped with developing that, but certainly changed that kind of relationship as well. So, definitely something that we're seeing more written about now as well. But the question that I wanted to ask you, Marcie, was, with that kind of disappearing of the line, we've now probably got even more data points to deal with. Does that make it overwhelming, or can we still pick some data points that are kind of helping us to understand if the relationships are doing what they need to do?
I think in some ways the blurring of the lines allows people to access more intelligence and more insight about the client than ever before, right? Because of their family, their preferences. You may even start to learn things about their routine that you didn't know previously. So we've all dropped the boundaries previously had in this environment. And I think that intelligence about clients, well, it's not technically a data point that we capture in a database somewhere, is still valuable insight into how to deliver a better client experience overall. Mm-hmm. And so we can't discount the value of those types of qualitative pieces of information that we're capturing along the way.
And I guess I want to, in a way, come full circle. The title of our session today is What Do Law Firm Clients Really Need and Want? And so I wanted to go to each of you, and Carl, I'm going to ask you to kick us off here, if you could. If you put yourself in the shoes of a law firm client, and you're looking at your legal service provider or product provider, what do you think your number one top need is going to be? And I'm going to define that as a must-have, versus your top want. I'd really like that if they can do that.
Look, I think in terms of the service has got to be fit for purpose. So it's got to have utility. The job's got to be done. And I think that's definitely something that clients are looking to achieve. But in terms of what would be nice, then I think it comes back to some of the points that have already been raised. It's almost the care beyond the legal advice. It's the concierge me through the matter. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'm looking for Ritz-Carlton, whatever level of service, and we've spoken a bit about customization and so on. I've signed up for that some attention is brought to that. So, arm around the shoulder and being walked through the matter, care beyond the legal advice, I think is a nice phrase that describes what I'm aiming for here. Yeah,
absolutely. Ben, your thoughts on that? Again, putting yourself in the shoes of the client?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Kyle. It needs to be a fit for purpose matter. That's the need. But in terms of the biggest want, I think it's to be communicated with in such a way that your mind is put at ease so that you know what the status of your matter is at any given time. And this can be done in any number of ways. But the number one complaint that we see from clients isn't actually that they had a bad result or a bad service delivered ultimately. It was that it made me anxious because I didn't know where it was at any given stage of the matter. And I think that what is part of the hourly billing thing actually underlies that a little bit. I remember I was speaking to a firm in Australia who said, oh, we'd like to update our clients more, but then we'd have to bill them for it. And I think that was, it needs to be as a matter of course that you're keeping people updated. But I think that's the number one want.
Yeah, it's kind of invest in your clients and invest in your people, and you've definitely invested in your business, right? So Marcie, again, going to get you to put yourself in the shoes of the client. Need and want.
I agree with Carl and Ben that ultimately it comes down to getting the right outcome. I do think that increasingly means, from a client perspective, needing law firms to become more collaborative, because problems and issues are becoming more complex, and a single individual is less likely today than ever before to have all of the skills and expertise that they need to address an issue. And so I think from a need perspective, that collaboration is becoming increasingly necessary. From a want perspective, I'm right on the same wavelength, right? It's the care and feeding aspects of it. It's the aspects that ultimately make clients' lives easier.
Silvia, you started us out. You're going to close us out as well. Again, client top one, need and want.
So I would say number one, and we hear it all the time, understand my business. And when we ask clients, what do you mean by that? They just, how are we growing? How are we going to grow? What's our business strategy? What are our goals? And in fact, part of the client team's strategic account program is ask clients for their business plan. They will give it to you. So understand their strategy. That allows you to anticipate their needs, what their potential legal needs may be, and you can help them reach their goals. I'd say another need is understand, and this is a little more granular, understand the business impact the legal issue is having. So even if it's a good thing, we're acquiring a bunch of new companies or new businesses to grow, there's an interruption to their business as a result of the legal needs they have. So understand the impact of the legal issue on the business. And again, that's sort of hand in hand with understand my business. So I'd say those are the two things they need. And there's lots of other little things, right? And then want is understand what's happening in our industry. And there's so much industry, you know, loads of industry data, but really understand what's impacting the client's company and the industry, positive and negative. And again, that just allows you to be more proactive with the clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Silvia, Cole, Ben and Marcie, unfortunately, we have come to the end of our time, and incredibly grateful to you for a fantastic conversation and discussion. And thank you very much, everybody, for attending. We've really enjoyed having you on this session, as we do on all of our sessions. If you would like to keep up to date with the work of the Centre, please don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn. We're also there on Facebook and on Twitter as well. Marcie, we hope that the hurricane stays away from...
It's awfully dark here.
Yeah, it's gone
I
dark.
know. It's really dark there. Oh my goodness.
Safe. And to all of you, again, likewise, keep well and stay safe. And thank you so much again for an amazing session today. Until next time.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye.
Terry, bye.
Bye.
Bye.